Welcome to this strategy-rich edition of The One Thing podcast, hosted by Ron Sheets. On each episode, Ron introduces you to the amazingly successful entrepreneurs from his Rolodex who reveal the simple truths behind the one marketing strategy they rely on to produce extraordinary results. Each episode is guaranteed to expose you to a proven approach for producing high-value and highly profitable business. Welcome to this episode of The One Thing podcast.
Welcome, everyone. Ron Sheets. This is another episode of the One Thing Business podcast. And on today's episode, you're going to meet Greg McCollum, who you see here with us. Now, Greg is a defense attorney practicing in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Now, when I say attorney, the usual party jokes and so forth, fling around about that. And there's kind of stereotypes as to what people think of or anticipate about with attorneys. And often, they're right or wrong. It doesn't matter. What I want you to understand is what we're going to learn today and what the importance of why I've asked Greg to be on this podcast with us. So the two things that, as I said, that people generally think about, like knee-jerk reaction is that they can't be trusted and they make a lot of money. Now, I want to address the first stereotype. So your perception of an attorney is often shaped by your experience with them or what you've heard about them, okay? And this is sometimes predicated by a common trait that they have, and actually Greg has kind of taught me about and helped me understand is that many attorneys have what's called a mastery-oriented personality. So they tend to want to dominate subjects and situations. Oftentimes this may be just a control tactic. Well, I first met Greg in a mastermind group about a year ago. And myself, having participated in many high-level mastermind groups and running my own, in those groups, if you've been there, they're usually filled with alpha-type personalities who are all competing for dominance. At the mastermind group that I met Greg at, what really stood out to me about Greg is that he was there to not assert authority, but really to absorb and learn. He's an exceptional student, which brings me to my second stereotype that people assume about attorneys, is that all attorneys make a lot of money. While the highest earning attorneys are oftentimes personal injury lawyers, Greg is a defense attorney focused on defending those who are arrested and accused of a crime. Now, as I've come to understand with Greg's help, a lot of defense attorneys are broke or struggling. They're working endless hours. They're chained to their offices, to their client cases, and to court schedules, and they have very little time for themselves. Now, given this reality, you may be wondering why I've asked a defense attorney to be on with us today. What kind of valuable insights could he offer that we could take away? But Greg is not your typical defense attorney. He once was, as he candidly shares in his upcoming book, From Chaos to Control, A Criminal Defense Lawyer's Journey to Building an Abundant Life. Greg's practice, as I understand, is positioned to do nearly $2 million this year. Now, this is in an industry where the average defense attorney grosses under $500K. Now, remarkably, Greg manages all of this while working about 17 hours a week, taking ample vacation time, and spending quality time traveling with his two daughters. Additionally, Greg now coaches other defense attorneys on how to achieve the lifestyles that they desire, challenging the industry dogma that oftentimes holds them back. So get ready to take some notes. And with that, Greg, thanks for joining me on today's podcast. I appreciate it.
Hi, Ron. It's great being here. It's good seeing you too.
Always good to talk to you. I always learn from you. We learn from one another, which is really the importance of being in a mastermind group and working together with smart people. So thank you. Why don't we start off with, I kind of set the stage a bit. Why don't we start off with and just kind of give the audience a little insight into who Greg McCollum is, what your business is, kind of that elevator presentation, if you wouldn't mind.
My law firm is Complete Legal Defense Team, and we defend the accused who have a lot to lose, which means that most of the people that we represent and defend in criminal cases and criminal investigations are people who they're not criminals. They're not professional criminals. They've never been arrested before. This happens to them. It was completely unexpected. And that's who we focus on. And so we have a unique practice in that way, and that's our brand, is helping people who have a lot to lose. In terms of the coaching company, Prosper at Law, I built a multi-seven-figure or approaching multi-seven-figure criminal defense law firm in an area where most criminal lawyers, actually I'd rephrase that, according to the American Bar Association surveys and studies, most criminal lawyers, most lawyers of any kind, even personal injury lawyers, I think 60 something percent of lawyers are under $200,000. And this is solos. This is not people that are partners in major firms, but people that are out there working. They don't really make a lot of money, and they have a tremendous amount of stress. And so one of my goals and missions now is, since I've kind of cracked the code on this and learned a lot, and it's been a long journey. I've been practicing law for decades. Since the things that I've figured out, I'm starting this coaching program. It's really launching now. I've written the book, I've done the podcast and those things. So that's another mission for me. And because of the law firm of where I positioned it and the way it's now truly a business and runs without me, where I'm really only in a CEO role, I've gotten to that point to where I'm able to offer this to people and help them replicate what I've done in my own law firm.
Well, I think that there's something that's important that you said there for people to understand is that you defend people who have a lot to lose, which in and of itself is a USP, and it helps really identify what you do. That's important. And I'm sure that you went through a number of amalgamations of that in order to get to what we do, because it's oftentimes hard to explain. And that was encapsulated. The other thing that you said is that it's a business, is that you now are in the capacity as a CEO running a business. Before we jump into the one thing, I'm going to kind of get sidetracked, and forgive me, I tend to do this. And the number on the what attorneys earn is lower than what I said in the opening, but you're now running a business. Prior to you cracking the code, did you think you were running a business? And I know the answer to that, but what was it that shifted to then now turn this into a business rather than something that you were constantly chasing your tail about?
My first insight or first revelation on this was that I had become a real estate investor back in the 90s, and I was lying on my sofa watching PBS, and Robert Kiyosaki was on there, and he said something to me in that show. He said, as an investor or as a business person, as a human being, he's yelling at the screen saying, your house is not an asset. And that woke me up. Then I read his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and he talked about the quadrant. And I had never seen that before in my life. And the quadrant separates a solo company, solopreneur, solo proprietorship, or whatever you call it, the solo versus the business. And in that book and on that show, he explained to me the difference. Now, at that time, I did not yet know and understand that my law firm could be a business. I literally did not know that. And so it never occurred to me for many, many years later that I could turn that solo practice law firm into a business.
What was it, if you could put your finger on, again, sticking with the one thing, what was it that finally, in looking back on it, was the thing that the switch that flipped on that now allowed you to go in this different direction and turn it into a business, if you can recall?
The one thing, not in terms of marketing, but the one thing that changed is that really just kind of on a fluke or a lark or whatever, kind of almost an act of desperation, I attended a seminar which had nothing to do with law. It had to do with growing your law firm into a business. And I sat there with my mouth open. I'm sitting there in the audience agape, just literally astonished because everything I heard I had never heard before, which is interesting because my father ran a Firestone store. He ran a business, but it never occurred to me that I could do this. Also, that person was teaching that there were levels that you're at, in the way he put it at the time, and this is, not an exact science, but that there's lawyers at 250,000, 500, 750, and $1 million. And so I'm looking at that, thinking to myself, really? There are levels? There are things, there are actionable steps you can take to go from one level to another? You're not just doomed to do this for 4 decades and then lock the door and leave. I had no concept of that. And so as I learned it, then I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. This is what I want to do. I didn't know this was possible. It's like going to the moon or something. I didn't know we could go. And so then I was determined to go.
Yeah. And I'm sure it took a lot of struggle because your mind shifts, your perception of it changed at that point in time. Yet when you left that seminar and went back to the business, you're still hampered with what you walked away and went to that seminar. So there's a lot that had to change, not only in yourself, but in the business. And that's, as I understand it, that's now what you're working on to help other defense attorneys and attorneys understand and learn in the coaching that you're doing. Is that correct?
It's not only correct, but that's even an understatement. That I would say that turning your law practice or turning your dental practice or turning your medical practice, turning your real estate practice, turning any business into a business, it's the personal growth precedes the professional growth. The personal part has to be done in order for you to be able to even see it and do it, which involves learning how to take some risks, learning how to make some mistakes, learning how to fail without stopping. And it's a building a business. It's a painful process. It's not impossible. It's doable. It's pretty simple. The concepts are pretty simple. The things that I teach, the things that other people teach, they're business principles. It's not magic. What is difficult, or where the magic is figuring out all of the beliefs and limitations in your own head, in your own subconscious, overcoming that. That's most of it, is you have to believe it's possible, and most of us don't. I didn't believe it for a minute. And it took a long time, and it took a lot of growth and emotional growth for me, and also fear, dealing with fear. And I learned a lot about fear. And those are the things that stop us. Those are the things that hold us back. And so if you have a law practice or you have a dental practice and you want to scale and you want to become big, there's so many things you have to do in terms of trust, delegation, calculated risks, belief, and all those things. And that's what I had to go through.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I kind of jumped ahead of myself there a bit. So let's step back now. With the law practice, what, in either advertising, marketing, whatever you can put your finger on, if you were to drop into a market starting fresh, what's the one thing that you would do that you have relied upon in your law practice to grow? And let me do a definition on grow, because this is what everybody's looking for, is they're looking for the, how do I make more money? But you've just described a path that, money has little to do with it. It has a lot more to do with attitude and fear and risk in that. But mechanically, if there were one thing that you would do, what would it be?
well, first of all, there's not one thing. There's there's 100 things. There may be 500 things. I don't know. But the one thing that I did is, and this is completely counterintuitive, and I've been asked this question before, and I've thought about it, is what is the one thing I did? And the one thing I did is I came up with a brand, and that kind of encapsulated who we were going to be. So instead of me being M. Gregory McCollum, attorney at law, PA, professional association, instead of me being M. Gregory McCollum, attorney at law, I became and created complete legal defense team. So that positioned me as what I was and what I was going to be. I was no longer going to be Greg McCollum, side hustling, running around lawyer who was the focus of, so you're going to hire Greg McCollum because I'm so great, I'm so accomplished. If I were in a different field, this is the best dentist, this is the best orthodontist, this is the best hairstylist. No, this is the company, this complete legal defense team. So that part was huge. And when I did that and basically came up with a standard color, standard logo, moved my office from a 1,200 square foot house that I had remodeled in a bad part of town to a Class A office building and complete legal defense team, and had my colors and my font and my logo. And everywhere I went, when I went to my local restaurant, my neighbors and people like that would comment on it, and mostly making fun of me, but I was fine with that. So that was one aspect. The other aspect would be, what does a complete legal defense team do? Who do we help? Who do we represent? So that would be a second part of that development.
So it really came down to defining who you were and who you were going to be for, rather than the unwashed masses of people. And I think it's important that the audience understand here, your business is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is kind of a one-off, meaning when you help a client and you're done and they're done, whatever the outcome is oftentimes they don't need you anymore. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes. And when I've been to seminars and I've learned from people, and people talk about customer retention and treating your customers right, and getting that repeat business and getting their friends and their family to come in and be part of that service that you offer in terms of, say, patience. You want to be doing such a good job in nurturing them and doing those things. I was always so envious of that, because I can't tell you how many times in my office when we're sitting in the conference room when the case is over, successfully concluded, they said to me, "Greg, don't take this the wrong way, but we hope we never have to see you and come in here again." That's the goal.
Yeah.
Is they never see me again. Okay? So there aren't a lot of businesses like that. Maybe surgeons are like that, I guess. But so it's a difficult business to be in and to market and grow successfully, which is one of the reasons I really want to focus on helping other criminal defense lawyers in my coaching program, because this is a unique thing, and other people, it's very difficult for them to teach you how to market and grow this, because it's not a model that you really encounter.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, when you understand that, you understand the accomplishment, the Herculean feat that you have accomplished by growing a practice that's, getting into multi seven figures, because it's a one and done next type of model. Whereas most of our businesses, my business including, is really built on not a lot of clients and repeat and referral and that type of thing. So that's important for everybody to understand here of what Greg has accomplished in growing this practice. Because using lawyer, if it's you're in personal injury, you know somebody else who got injured, they refer you and it gets around. But um, um, they don't want to come back and see you again. So that's an important point. Let's dig in a little bit with regard to advertising. We're all familiar with the personal injury attorney advertising that we see on television, we see in the billboards driving through town and that type of thing. From an approach, once you had defined who you were, your brand, and who you were for, how did you go about advertising that? What mediums did you go after, and which ones did you find worked the best for you?
I think I've used them all, and billboard, television, internet, digital marketing, print media, birthday cards, announcements, those sort of things, networking. I've done every bit of it, and the issue there, and I think this is common for probably all businesses, certainly when they're starting and they have low annual revenues, is the dichotomy between building a brand versus a transactional type of marketing. So for lawyers like me, it's the internet search, and so you have the search engine optimization. Where are you in the 3-pack? And then that morphed into pay-per-click, which morphed into local service ads. And so that is really very little of that is branding, that somebody's at the point of sale, they want help, and so they click, and then they're on the phone with you. And so, but that drives business. It drives my business. And we spend a tremendous amount of money on that, and it works. And every dollar I spend on that, I regret that I'm not spending that dollar building brand awareness. And so I think there's always those two things, that you absolutely want a brand, you want to build brand awareness, but you have to stay in business and pay your bills. And so then you're doing the point of sale transactional. They need somebody now, and they're just looking at you and other people and calling you and other people, which then changes the sale and how you convert. So it's not wasted money. It drives the business, but it's not sustainable, and it doesn't grow. The lawyers that I know that do a lot of pay-per-click and they're doing well, but they're not progressing. And as it becomes more and more competitive, then it gets down to who has the most money, because the most money will win that all the time, whereas a brand and a brand identity can stand out and have a longer, more successful life.
And the idea of brand marketing and brand advertising is contradictory to the approach that I take, but it's important. And I think the thing that I'll add based on what you just said is that the brand awareness and the brand value and so forth is a residual effect of the other things that you're doing in order to attract the business. Because of the business that you're in, brand isn't, unless you're coming out of a major murder case and so forth, it's a high profile in the media, and that the brand is important there. But what you're doing, as you just said, is driving business to come to you. And the thing that I'll add, and we don't have anywhere near the time to go into it here, the thing that we haven't even talked about is it's one thing to drive the business. So do the pay-per-clicks, to do the digital and get the phone to ring. The other side of it is, what do you do with that once the phone rings? Which, it's great. We can drive all kinds of traffic. But what we don't have time to go into today on this call is what you do once you get the lead. And as I've come to understand and learn from your business, is that there's a whole system and a process once that call comes in as to qualifying that prospect. Are they right for you? Are you going to be able to help them? Is this going to be, because you reach that level where you can't help everybody. So it's a common challenge that I hear amongst businesses, especially solo businesses, is that they can do the digital, they can do the online advertising, and they can drive the attraction. However, when the call comes, they run into, well, we get all kinds of bad leads. And I am a huge advocate on the idea that there are no bad leads. It's bad systems of what you do with the leads. And it's another piece in the wheel that you've conquered, is what do you do with the lead? And again, we don't have time to get into it today, but that's important for everybody to understand. Is it's one thing to drive the lead. It's another to then what do you do with it once you get it? And you have a whole system in the background that you've built that does that. So forgive me for grandstanding there and kind of pontificating on that, but it's important for everybody to understand, hey, great, I'm going to just go run out and do this digital advertising. I'm going to drive all kinds of leads. No, you're just going to perpetuate the problem if you don't know what to do with those leads. Is there anything you would add to that or subtract from that?
I agree with what you said, because, there are no bad leads in the sense that if they didn't want to hire you or use your product or service, they would have never contacted you. There's no reason for them. They're not doing a survey. They would not have contacted you. So they want something that they believe you sell or you offer. So what's a bad lead? If you're in a dental practice and you do these services and they call you because they need, a podiatrist, or they need something else, or they need braces for their children, and that's not something you do, that's a bad lead. Or, and this happens a lot with criminal defense, and it could happen in any service, I would think, they contact you and because they think you're a free service. They think you're a government service. They think it's a subsidized service. They think that they're getting something, and they just don't have the money to get the service that they want. It's like going to a car dealership and they don't have any money to buy a car. Most people wouldn't do that. So if they don't have any money to buy and they're trying to buy something that you don't offer, then they're a bad lead. Okay, and that's a function of marketing. Why did they call you? Why did they not get a message that you don't do that? So that's marketing. But if they're not in one of those categories and they have the money and they want the service that you offer, then they're a good lead. It's just then you are not good at converting and selling. And that's a whole, like you said, I mean, we could do 3 podcasts on that.
Yeah.
Selling. That's something that's very misunderstood by so many people. Even a lot of salespeople are missing the mark on that, in my view, in the way I teach selling.
Yeah. So, well, good. Well, with that, any last minute wisdom, because I want to keep an eye on the clock here and respect your time. Any last piece of wisdom that you can share with the audience and going forward based on what we've talked about as far as that one thing, whether it's mindset, whether it's mechanics, strategy, tactics, any last thoughts?
The main thing I would say is that if you look at my law firm, say, and complete legal defense team, we defend the accused who have a lot to lose. Getting that saying was very time consuming. It was very difficult. And if I had to wait to market my law firm and wait to grow and start moving forward until I had that magic statement or that slogan in place, I would have never gotten anywhere. Because it took, I don't know exactly how many months it took. It may have taken over a year. And this was something from time to time, I would get out one of those legal pads and just write it out and write it out and write it out and throw it away or keep it there so I could see what I wrote so I don't write it again, and just kept working it and kept working it and kept working it. That may have been the 1,000th attempt to get that. And so this is not something that you can just snap your fingers and have. It's important, and I'd say you need it, but it's a lot of starting and stopping to trying to figure that out. None of this stuff just comes to you. There's no magic moment. There's no secret pill. It's just effort and quiet and thinking and trying. And the key, though, is you don't have to have it all to start moving forward and changing your business and becoming more profitable and growing and scaling. These things come if you keep focusing on them and working on them, and don't get frustrated if you don't just have it. You can't sit down in half an hour and come up with this. It's impossible. It's going to take probably months of effort before you come up with something like that.
And you don't do it necessarily entirely on your own, meaning there's input, whether it's, as you went to a seminar, it's either that input or it's input that you come across, something you read, something you see, that it's just that ongoing. And to bring this to a conclusion, to summarize, what Greg said there is what you focus on grows. And the challenge that he described at the beginning with regard to the business of, if you focus on, in his case, just the cases, the clients, the court docket schedules, and so on and so forth, if that's what your focus is on and you're just consumed by that, then that's what's going to perpetuate and grow. And not to oversimplify it, but what I heard him say is by shifting his thinking and allowing himself to focus on the bigger picture, on the bigger where we're going, it allowed him to get out of the rat race. It's probably an understatement, Greg, but would you agree with that?
Yes, it's just simply you have to work on your business, not just in it.
Yeah.
You got to work in your business, and your business has to run properly. But you have to get out of it at least a little bit in the beginning to work on it if you're going to make any progress and grow and scale.
Yeah. And I would imagine that there's a lot of people watching this right now go, I get it, I understand it, but how do I do it? And that's what you're now going out and helping other defense attorneys figure out how to change that in what you're doing now with the coaching. If people want to find out more about you, Greg, they want to learn more about you, they want to get in contact with you, they want to have a conversation with you, you're not readily available where people can just pick up the phone and call, but how would you suggest that people find out more about you and start that process if they want to learn more to get connected with you?
In terms of the coaching company, you just basically do a search for prosperatlaw.com, go to our website, and it shows you how to contact me.
Okay, excellent. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you again, Greg, for investing your time today. I know you're busy in growing the business, so I appreciate it very, very much. If anybody has any questions, as I always say, these podcasts and these recordings are best used when you watch them multiple times. You can't watch this or listen to this through one time, go back through it again, because you will pick up new things, because your circumstances and your situation will change from day to day. So I highly encourage you to go back through this, watch, listen, and consume this podcast again and again with a pad of paper and a pen. Thank you, everybody, for watching. My name is Ron Sheets. This has been the One Thing Business Podcast. I see you on the next episode. Above all, go out and be successful. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks for tuning in. I'm sure you got a lot from this episode. Join Ron and his next guest here on the One Thing Podcast.